So we are kind of with a distinct and different varied personalities and representation from different parts and different type of areas of expertise and experience. I think we have moved forward, so we'll have some areas of query and some interactive discussion to follow. But before that, I have Merine Mukherjee to give his part of the, whichever way you prefer. Whichever way you prefer.
Two things brought me up here. One is I need to see the children first. And to you, I mean, the men sitting extreme right, the two men sitting to your extreme right, both of them are my teachers. So it's a bit unnerving, I mean, when you talk in presence of your teacher. So I need to dissociate myself a bit, right? So Prashanto Da, we used to call him Prashanto Da. Professor Giri was my teacher back in my college, Narendrapur Ramakrishna Mission. And my first job interview, Dr. Papu was in the panel. So he asked me, "Ki korbe tumi?" So for Bengali speaking ones, what would you do? So I couldn't give an answer. I mean, I still am finding ki korbo ami. I don't really know Papu da ki korbo. So I am still finding it out. Ki korbo, I don't know. I'm just logging, but then to share some of the experiences, just that. Okay, so this is my third time in Nanritam, and the experience is as inspiring as it was. I came here in 2018, Ranjanadi, I mean, pre-COVID. So I came back in between, and then this is the third time. I'm as inspired as I was in the first time. So thank you for giving the opportunities. So one of your fellow students in the morning was showing us a model. I mean, we were in the school, and one of the models, I mean, he was explaining fantastically. I was discussing with Bharatidi how exactly he started with a quadrilateral, and he actually came back to a square. I mean, kind of adding assumptions, and how exactly from a general case you go to a specific case. I mean, I was discussing with Bharatidi that this is exactly what we used to learn in deductive logic. So I'll give you a case about the other way around, the inductive logic. I mean, you have heard very specific cases here. So I was just noting them down. It was education. We talked about education. We talked about livelihoods. We talked about, Papuda talked about teenage marriage, teenage pregnancy, the years of adolescence. We heard the students who were talking about gender discrimination, something that they have faced in their households. We have talked about poverty. Some of them were, Sir was talking about climate change and all. We also heard some of the local artisans, environmentally friendly things, the climate change thing, the climate action has come into discussion very much. So all these things, this is to the students, of course, not for us. You know, all these hindering factors, all these impediments are something we now kind of use to measure poverty. So these are all kinds of hindering factors are actually helpful to measure poverty. It's no longer income poverty anymore. So there are many measurements of poverty. My country, our country has seen many measurements of poverty. So of late we are also using this multidimensional poverty and all these things. So all these impediments which actually hold you back to, at a suboptimal level where you cannot achieve your full potential are all poverty indicators, or all kind of those hindrances. So we will talk about that. In fact, the organization I come from, so in one-liner, I am Merine. I look after one of the state chapters of one of the NGOs in working in West Bengal. We started in West Bengal. So this coming 1st of February, we will be completing 50 years of journey. All are welcome. They are back in Kolkata. Child in Need Institute, CINI. So I look after the West Bengal chapter of CINI. There are other state chapters as well. We work in the eastern and northeastern part of the country. And we work with children. So children are they are there in the center of our universe, CINI's universe, right? So, but children coming from very difficult backgrounds, children not as much entitled as many of us here are. So children whose rights have been violated. Children having problems with health. We work with health, we work in the domain of nutrition, we work with education, and we also work with the children having issues with child protection. So these are the 4 domains that we work with. But then, I will not exactly speak about how CINI does. You have heard these examples. These are also kind of problems that we face. I mean, we work with rural communities across West Bengal, right from Sundarbans up to the Himalayas and other states as well. We are also in some of the urban agglomerations as well, right from Kolkata, Shiliguri, Asansol, and all these areas. So the problems are more or less the same. So when I heard from Priyanka the topics of discussion, I said that let me put forward a new thing, a new framework to you all, again to the students, because probably also in the morning we heard some of them were having models on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals and all. Some of them were actually showing a Gram Sabha and all. And so I thought that I would rather speak on a new framework, not a theoretical framework, but a framework for action. A framework that has come down post-COVID. Incidentally, the time coincided after COVID abated. But then let's have a discussion on that, right? So I'm not going into very specific examples, but in this framework, all the topics that have been discussed now will be covered. I mean, so this is a general framework going into, asking us to act on those issues. So the framework gives us avenues how we should look into those issues, how we should bring forward those issues, and how we should act on those issues, right? So there is a history to it. In the month of April 2020, when the world was slowly going into the veil of the pandemic, the last pandemic, probably the most well-documented pandemic in human history, Arundhati Roy, some of you have heard about her, the noted writer. She writes in Financial Times. There is a fantastic column. It is still archived. You can go back to those columns. And she writes there that like all the previous pandemics, the present COVID pandemic is a portal. What is a portal? Then she explains a gateway from the present world to the next. A new world order is coming. So I was keen, in fact, we didn't have the round of questions, but I was also keen to understand what was happening pre-COVID in these issues and what are the new things you are seeing post-COVID. So we will come to those. But then she explains, and there, just a fortnight back in the same column in Financial Times, Yuval Noah Harari, he also echoes something similar. He says that he was trying to prepare us, the communities, for 2 particular important choices. The first between a totalitarian surveillance in the name of COVID, but that would continue post-pandemic as well, and the citizens' empowerment on the other side of the spectrum. And the second choice was between a nationalist isolation and the global solidarity. So when we discuss these things, I mean, these local issues, these have a global ramification as well, right? So he says, and I quote him, many short-term emergency measures will become a fixture of life. That is the nature of emergencies. They fast-forward historical processes. Decisions that in normal times could take years of deliberation are passed in matter of hours. Immature and even dangerous technologies are pressed into service because the risks of doing nothing is even greater, even bigger. So then he questions that what happens when everybody works from home and communicates only at a distance? We have seen that during the lockdown, right? And what happens when what happens when the entire schools and universities go online? And I add, the quotation ends here, and I add what happens when there are too many layoffs in the formal as well as the informal sectors. What happens when people in thousands start walking hundreds of kilometers for their homes in search of a shred of familiarity, dignity, shelter, and probably also food, right? What happens when the hospitals fall short of beds and medical oxygen? The sites they produced and the structural, social, and the economic inequality they reveal in the following months were too appalling to miss. So the pandemic would surely be brought into discussion, right? Now, it's almost 2 years now that the storm has gone, but the emergency remains, right? Back home, what happened? I mean, this is coming from our field experience, and it matches exactly what we have heard just now. Too many children who have forgotten to read and write across the country, right? I don't know globally, but of course for India. Too many young adults bearing a permanent scar in some form of mental health issue, right? Thousands of teenage girls getting married off under the veil of the pandemic, an overburdened health workforce heavily skewed to contain the virus left local but wide gaps in the routine immunization of infants, routine immunization of mothers. And we are actually seeing in Murshidabad, in Kolkata, sporadic, small kind of outbreaks, measles outbreak, rubella outbreak. All the children, the cohort, the entire cohort that have missed routine immunization during COVID times are coming out with these local outbreaks, right? The health system is also very much concerned, and they're trying to contain these local outbreaks, but these things are happening. Now, there is a glimmer of hope, right? In October 2021, exactly, over a year then into the pandemic, and while the country was still under a sporadic lockdown and unlock phases, an expert group comprising of bureaucrats from the states and the union, I mean the central government, the academicians, and some of the practitioners, we were a part of it as an organization, along with specialized institutes, I mean in the country itself, actually tabled a report to Government of India. I was actually wanting to talk about the report, but probably the report is quite large. We will discuss a bit of it. And that eventually got published by none other than the Ministry of Panchayati Raj. So there is a new, this ministry is quite new. I mean, it happened with the last UPA government, and there was no Ministry of Panchayati Raj. Panchayati Raj was actually dealt with by the Ministry of Rural Development at that time. So, but this MOPR actually came out publishing the report. Now, 2 years back to that, in September 2019, the UN Secretary General, the then UN Secretary General, had called for a decade of action on 3 levels. One is the global action, of course, the global action with more resources and smarter solution to global problems. Number 2 is the local action, embedding the needed transitions in policies, budgets and institutions, the frameworks of governments. And number 3 is what we actually do, people's action by youths, civil society, students like you, the private sector, the unions, and of course the government and the academia to generate momentum for required transformations. Now, what was this actually for? Some of you would know that 2015 to 2030 is the period for Sustainable Development Goals. Before that, we had Millennium Development Goals, but then we changed some of the directions, and the new set of goals for the entire country, the global things, the period is coming to an end in 2030. So the global call for action was actually towards achieving the SDGs, some of the problems.
Mr. Mukherjee, yes. Just not to stop you, the momentum, but just I was trying to summarize a little bit to help further. So essentially it looks like the top-down, bottom-up, having the policy in between, and the execution sector involving the grassroots. That's the core theme of the things, that we have a framework of SDG from the top. Now, how in the policy interpretation and implementation, and how from the grassroots to integrate the local actions and local things that we are talking about, and putting all those perspective in a platform and a framework so that the proper action can be all integrated towards a concerted effort. Is that the theme?
Exactly, you have made it, you have nailed it. I mean, 16 out of 17 SDGs, they took 16 out of 17 SDGs, 169 SDG targets, the global targets. At that point of time, there were 231 global indicators to measure these targets. And in the recent years, in 2023, I mean, the government of India also publishes on 29 June, sir. 29 June happens to be the National Statistics Day, the birthday of Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis. They come out with a new set of indicators, which is the National Indicator Framework. This report actually positioned itself to have these local actions, and they came out with a local indicator framework for local actions to be pronounced in the development highway of SDGs. So till then, SDGs for us, people like us, working at a village level, at a micro level, at the ward level in the urban communities, SDGs were something global, SDGs were something national. But then, at this point of time, from October 2021 till then, they had a revised framework, of course. In 2023, 29 June, they came out with a revised framework. And they have actually showed how the 16 SDGs, the only SDG that is left behind is SDG number 17, which calls for global partnerships and collaboration. All the rest 16 SDGs have been cut down into 9 themes, nationally applicable all over India, 9 themes for villages. They are a bit short in the urban kind of integration, but the 9 themes they have come out with, we have discussed this. So
Mr. Mukherjee, I was again, for the sake of the discussion and follow-up and the time as well. So looks like the policies, again I'm repeating probably, the policies and the structures are defined in a scaffold that have the opportunity to integrate all the thoughts. But question comes back to the real intervention and action that we are discussing at the bottom. But these are not disintegrated effort. These are kind of part of all kind of rivulets that is helping to a main river to flow, but they're all connected.
Actually, whatever we are doing locally,
Exactly.
this is the right time, right opportunity to have it actually pronounced at the national level.
And you also said very correctly the goal number 17, the collaboration. I think
that is only left out.
I think today's whole platform and discussion and thoughts essentially reflecting that number 17, that how the different efforts, whether it's education or health, how from the grassroots you can collaborate and build towards a solution.
Exactly.
I think that's a good way. Please have a final line on yours.
With pronouncing the 9 themes. You see exactly what we have discussed. So the theme 1 is the poverty-free and enhanced livelihood village. The theme 2 is the healthy village. And they have they have connected the SDGs. I mean, if you work on one particular theme, multiple SDGs get covered. And the theme 3 is the child-friendly village. Theme 4 is water sufficient village. Theme 5 is clean and green village. 6, self-sufficient infrastructure in village. Theme 7 is mostly scheme integration, socially secured village. Theme 8 is village with good governance, local governance. And theme 9 is engendered or women-friendly village. So we can take this discussion offline, but we have a framework where we can integrate all our efforts and see how these things, I mean, a minuscule effort at a village would actually push forward the national goal. So this is the right opportunity. I thought I would rather discuss on that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I think thanks to all the speakers for very enlightening, enriching and passionate their input and sharing their experience. I think that was the whole idea. Of course, we can further build upon it and we'll continue. But I think I'm just going to take one short step away from the formalized things we thought. Of course, it was not a debate. Everybody has provided their points correctly. But I still would not, I was thinking, at least before we go to the next part, I was thinking to applaud, I'm taking this myself, to applaud two of our students. I think they, in this forum, probably put their points so much. Can we have an applaud for your friends? They really put it very marvelous way that in this big forum, people get nervous. They will probably not be able to tap properly, but in the way, so courageously, they put the points so simply from their experience. It's, I think, hats off to them. That says they're really thinking differently. That's the future generation we need.